Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fiction genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Frequency. So in this episode, what's her name? Is it Marissa or Larissa? The lady from last episode who was connected to the camp. It turns out she was, in fact, Nightingale's first victim, and so they start looking into it a little bit more. Basically, Raimi comes to the decision. She's like, okay, Frank, you kind of go to her house, kind of ask to look around in her room and stuff like that. And he's like, wait, what? So what? Are you want me to tell her about her, tell her family, her brother and her mom about it? But it's like, Raimi's like, don't tell them anything. It's like, they need to know because apparently, her body won't be found, until like 2001. So that's like 5 more years that they have to not know what happened to their little girl, to her. So it's kind of like, it's like, ease their pain a little bit. But Raimi's like, it's the best thing to do right now because it's like with it, because them having that information isn't going to be good. It's like, having that information won't change things. It won't ease their pain. I mean, it might ease their pain a little, but what ease their pain even more is if you catch the guy who did it. I mean, because the sad fact of the matter is that's something Frank can't change because she's already been dead for like a little while, so it's not possible to actually ever save her. So that's kind of the drawback of this whole situation, that even, when they learn about new information, it's impossible to save her. It's not impossible to save the victims he's already taken, but it's like they can't save the people that, granted, we saw the whole situation with, what was her name, Amanda? Like, yeah, they saved her in 96 just for Nightingale to kill her in 2016, so. But so it's like, because I'm literally about to call her Lucy. I'm about to cross TV shows in my head. Raimi was basically like, we catch him in 2016, he won't see you coming in 96, because that way it's like we'll have his identity and whatnot, but you can kind of catch him. We'll find you. I'll give you his identity, so obviously you can catch him in 96 and kind of stop all this from happening. And that's something I'm very curious about too. Like really talking about like when it's all said and done. Because we know that Raimi's mind can remember both timelines. If they change stuff again, does that mean there's going to be a third? I think that's probably going to be the twist at the end of this, is that there's going to be a third timeline created that she has to remember. But even then, I don't think Nightingale's going to be the entire thing, but I think there are going to be ramifications for doing what they're doing too that could potentially lead into a third season. I know that's kind of me getting way ahead of myself, but it's just like my brain is already, because I'm already thinking like there's going to be something there. Like, there's no way this is all going to be 100% resolved. They're probably going to, kind of like other, time traveling shows that I'm not going to mention because I'm not going to like talk about other stuff, but you can pretty much allude to what you can pretty much guess what I'm alluding to. And it's like, maybe there will be ramifications for doing, there's already ramifications in this timeline. And it, like, as in another show might point out, it's like the more you change time and stuff like that, does it, like, what kind of problems are created just from the fact that you're changing things, It does beg up the question, is there such thing as fate? Is everything predetermined? And it kind of seems like it isn't, because it's like, once again, life is made of nothing but choices. So things could easily go one way or another. Because that's why I keep bringing it up. Like, I don't understand what went so wrong. Why in a timeline where Frank is alive, Julie dies? Why is that? Is that some, like, sick cosmic balance? It's like, oh, one of your parents lived when he was supposed to die, so we have to take the other parent away from you? Or, like I said, I feel like I still believe wholeheartedly it has something to do with Daniel. Because it's like, he's one of those things in her life that didn't shift over. Like, the fact of the matter is, her and Daniel never met, obviously, because her mom's not alive. But I feel like he's connected somehow, but maybe he's not. Once again, kind of bringing it up to another CW show. I know I wasn't going to do it, but I feel like it fits in the realm since it's another CW show, and it was part of Super-Fanta-Fi. But Beauty and the Beast, Kyle, I was so adamant that something was up with Kyle. He did something a little messed up, but at the same time, overall, he still was a good guy. I doubted him the entire final season, but then it was like, oh, he turned out to be an okay guy. So I could be completely wrong about Daniel. What was that just then? The way I said it, I don't know. Maybe it's just my nose a little clogged up or whatever. It sounded weird the way I just said Daniel. A funny thing in this episode, I know I'm kind of getting all over the board. That's my problem. My brain is very scattered when it comes to recording stuff. Was the whole Gordo aspect of this episode. I really like that. the fact is, he's just like, Kyle comes over, he's brought a pizza and everything, and it's like, hey, I appreciate the whole what appears to me to be Gears 4 that he's playing, and he's like, oh, Raymond, come play, but then like she's kind of caught up with work and everything. Kyle comes in, and then I was like, oh, he's like, don't worry, I'm her non-sexual life partner. And he's like, oh, you brought pizza, beer? Now I'm also your non-sexual life partner, and they actually kind of. It seems like they're kind of bonding a little bit, which is kind of interesting. But at the same time, it also deals with the fact is that Daniel just pops up because he's super drunk, and he starts talking to Raimi. He's like, "Oh, why are you here?" And Raimi goes back aside, sees her having so much fun. He's like, "Guys, I'm gonna be right back." And she drives him home. They even kiss at one point because he's like, at first he's kind of like, he's bringing up the fact this it's like her fault that he's like this is because he can't get her off his mind. And so she's kind of enjoying it a little bit. He kisses her. He's a little, obviously super drunk. So she takes him inside his place. He throws up. She's helping look for some aspirin for him and sees the ring. And it just flashbacks. It makes her think about the fact is because she, back in episode 1, during the original timeline, she knew that he was going to propose to her because she found the ring. And now she sees that sit. It looked like it might actually be the same ring. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't get that. I wasn't paying that close of attention. It's just like, oh, it's a ring. So. I mean, I'm a douchebag. I'm not very observant, so like to me, it's like a ring is a ring. But like to someone else, to someone that might be important to, it's like because it's. I say douchey because it's like I'm like denouncing what means so like denouncing what could symbolize as love. It's like I'm kind of shading on it a little bit, but at the same time, it's just it's just an object that symbolizes it. So I'm not going to go down that route. Nevertheless. It just kind of sucks. It's just kind of like, oh, because that's what I felt like he was leading to. He's like, I'm this, I got a great job, got a great place, and I got, you're what? He's like, never mind. I was like, right. It's like, I knew it had something to do with his girlfriend because he never brought her up once during this whole situation. It's like, all right, because you do have a girlfriend, and I think Raimi did kind of forget about that, and it's like, now he sees that he was actually going to propose to her. It's kind of interesting, like, how she's kind of... In a certain degree, you could honestly say Raimi's kind of messing with his life. I mean, it's because you had this life with him, you want to kind of bring that back, and it's like you stalked him a little bit, and now you kind of persuade him to kind of be with you. I mean, it seems like it I'm sad to say, but it seems like a cheating situation now, so it like sullies it a little bit. It's like, granted, yes, you were together in a different timeline, but it's like you're not together in this timeline, and it makes what you're doing a little shady. It's like I said, dude, I get it. Like, you liked him. He was going to be your fiance. And it's like, you can't let, like, they were together for like 2 years. You can't let that 2 years just disappear from your heart. You felt the way you felt about him, especially because it's like, for you, like, that transition from this timeline from the previous timeline to this timeline was like only a matter of moments. So it's like, that's still fresh in your heart. I was kind of hoping she was going to, like, it did seem like, because Frank kind of convinced her to like, hey, you need to just kind of move on. And that was kind of like where it seemed like things between her and Kyle were going. But then after seeing the ring and things, it seemed like she might be trying to keep Kyle closer because she was actually talking to him and they were just like working the case file and everything. But it's just, I don't know. I was kind of thinking like, okay, so maybe she's decided to kind of let Daniel go, but then at the end of the episode, she ends up kind of like, once again, kind of making out with him. So it's kind of, like I said, it's that in itself is just going to heavily complicate things. But I think that's kind of like, actually, it's very interesting because it's like kind of a mirror situation to Frank's situation, because he ends up finding out about Julie and Coach Ted, because not only did Raimi see them make out, also had the patrol outside, because I was wondering, they're like being all shady towards them and everything. I was like, oh crap. It's like, is this something related to Stan? And like, I just wanted, if it was me, I want someone to tell me. And it's like, oh, right. And so he ends up confronting Julie, and then he ends up finding out from Julie. It's like, oh wait, what? You kissed him in front of Raimi? It's like, she's like, just shut up, get out. It's like, because he brings up the whole thing. He's like, you know how hypocritical you are? You're talking about not to bring my baggage home, and it's like, you're going to do some crap like that? What? You hypocrite? Essentially. because the fact of the matter is, Julie didn't go into full detail. She's like, "Oh, we just kissed in front of him. It's never kissed in front of Raimi. That's never going to happen again." Didn't explicitly talk about the fact is that it's not like you and Ted have only just kissed. You had sex. I know you left that little nugget out, but at the same time, it's like, like I said, just from a show perspective, I just had to point that out too. But it's like, at the end of the day, she's a grown adult. They're kind of having their issues, and it's not like he hasn't strayed before. The whole like, I keep forgetting, like I keep missing her name. Elisa Diaz's character from last episode, which I'll get to that in a second, but it's like he hasn't, like, the fact of the matter is they're both wrong in this situation. Like, don't get me wrong, Julie has every right to be pissed because it's just like, like so much of her life, like it's like Frank wasn't there. It's like she was the one taking care of everything, the bills, the food, helping Raimi with homework and stuff like that. She was there for Raimi when Frank wasn't. So, it's like, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like she has every right to be happy, and she can't have Frank can't just come stumbling back into their lives, and it's kind of the whole thing at the beginning. Is like he can't just come stumbling back into their lives and expect everything to fit the way it was. It doesn't work like that, because they end up having a conversation later on, because Frank ended up finding, I forgot what you call those. Like, you see them a lot back in the day. I don't know if kids nowadays still make them, or even teenagers make them, but it's like the little foldy paper was like, oh, you count numbers, and it's like, oh, there's one thing underneath. I don't remember what those are actually called, but when he opened it up, it's like, oh, ways to make mommy and daddy happy again. And so him and Julie actually sit down and have a conversation, and he realizes it's like, he brings up the fact that originally the reason he got a job was because he wanted obviously the money raised, and that would mean that, he could support Raimi more. It's like in the beginning, he did it for Raimi, but as time went on, like he changed, and the reason for doing it changed because it was more so, he realizes now, he's like, I did it for me. I did what was good for me, no longer what was good for you and Raimi. Like me turning my back on y'all like that was for my own sake, just because you could argue it's like Frank did that because it was like, it made things easier because he was turning into someone else, and he wasn't the Frank that was the family man anymore. And then he even admits, like, he never wanted to admit it, but the fact is that he changed. And Julie admits she's changed. It's just how things have, worked out. Because there was even a moment where it seems like late at the end of the episode, her and Raimi are okay. But initially when it came to finding out about seeing her coach and her mom make out, she starts acting out. She starts, like, not listening, kind of talking back to her mom and stuff like that. She's never been that kid from what we've seen so far. She's been a very good kid, and it's like you see that, and it's kind of low because why she's doing it, and eventually Julie kind of pieces it together too about the whole thing, because even she was kind of like, hey, I'm gonna quit the team, just forget about it. Kind of ended up destroying the glove that her mom bought for her, so just because it's like she feels like her mom is betraying her dad. Like, it's a very complex situation. Like, even as a kid, she's 8, so it's not like she's an idiot. She comprehends what that means, like what was happening between them. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of interesting how that storyline kind of coincides with the whole thing with Raimi. Kind of stuck between Kyle and Daniel. It's kind of like, because essentially Frank is talking about the fact is that he wants to kind of make things work. It's like he made Julie kind of fall in love with him once. He can do it again. He just has to work on it because for both of them can agree on one thing, and it's kind of some basically him and Julie can agree on what's most important is Raimi, and then Raimi was kind of like, it's kind of funny because you and me can only agree on the fact is that the only thing that's important is mom. So it's just, it kind of works out like it. As I know, something I mean, just because I just sat here and thought about it, it's like we really don't know anything about Frank's parents. Are they still alive? Or Julie's parents alive? Because that hasn't come up so far in the show, so I wonder, is that something that's ever going to be brought up at all? Because it's like, I would assume Julie's parents aren't alive, because it's like, well, no, her parents aren't they? Because they were the ones that kind of pushed for the whole funeral thing, weren't they? Oh, no, they were her aunts, weren't they? Her aunts were the ones that were pushing Raimi to have a funeral for her mom, if I remember correctly. I don't remember. It was some family members. I think it might have been aunts, like her sisters or whatever. So I don't know, because we haven't really seen any outside family for either side. So I am legitimately curious. Like, is that going to be something that pops up or not? But I don't. Like I said, I don't trust Daniel, and I'm just. But still, like I said, I'm going to try to give him the benefit of the doubt. Especially because we got a new particular person of interest to look at. Essentially, it's this the guy that Satch and Raimi talked to at the beginning of the episode, the guy who was kind of connected to the camp too. So basically, there's this woman named Megan who we seem to like. She basically was in a camp back in 91. Essentially, she walked out of the woods naked, her arms cut. And so it seems like, Nightingale's first victim ended up helping her. But the moment she came back, Megan was already gone. So, like I said, I don't remember, is it Marissa or Larissa? Whatever the case, she never actually found out whatever happened to her. And like no one knows anything about her because like they never got her last name, only that her name was Megan. And she ends up being the lady that we see pop up throughout the episode who's in that I guess psychiatric ward, psychiatric facility, whatever, because it's like apparently she's tried to kill herself 3 times in the past, and she's keep talking about the fact is that she wants to, because she's trying to call Raimi about the whole Nightingale situation. But the fact is that the doctor, like the moment the doctor's like, okay, I'll dial it for you, but I'll have to monitor the conversation. And she was like, never mind. And then later on, she tried to leave a message, but obviously the orderlies came and stopped her. Then that same dude comes and says like, oh, like we're just here for your sake. It's like you're being erratic, talking about stuff connected to the Nightingale. It's like you try to kill yourself again. It's like, no, we're going to get, me and the doctor have decided like it's best to be here, for you to stay here. And then she's like screaming. She's like, no, he's a monster. He's a monster. Now, 2 things. To me, I was wondering, is the doctor in on this? Because the fact of the matter is that he's so along with this situation. So there was part of me wondering, is he a bad guy or not? But it does seem like maybe he's not, that he is legitimately a doctor that's trying to do his best. Maybe, he's doing what he thinks is best for her, his patient. And the reason why she was kind of freaked out about, like, him listening on a conversation, because it's like, I guess because she felt like if he was there listening, he wouldn't believe her. He'd think, he'd kind of tell the police, ignore her. She's part of this, it's just part of her delusions or whatever. She's actually a suicidal patient and stuff like that. Or maybe it's because like she doesn't want to open up, just like she hasn't opened up to anyone about the whole situation. So maybe that's what that was about too. Like she was too embarrassed or ashamed maybe to let that officer know. Now the other thing I want to point out is the guy that stopped her. It has to be her brother, right? Because it's like, why would his take on it matter? Like, because it's like, if he was some stranger, you can't really facilitate, like, someone being locked up, kept in a facility, to make sure that they're okay. Like, that's usually a family member thing, and they never expressly be like, that was my brother, that's my sister. It's like, but that has to be his sister, because it's the only way that could be, at the very least, some family member. But at the very least, it has to be immediate family, so it doesn't have to be immediate family, but I would assume so, because it's like, he's able to kind of control that, so I'm wondering whether he actually is Nightingale. I don't think he is. I think he's just a terrible person. Kind of like that dude from earlier in the season is like, he might be Nightingale, but it's like, no, he was just a terrible human being. So maybe it's a similar situation there. I don't know. Like, from what I saw in the next episode, it does seem like she does sneak out and meet Raimi. Now, whether she really has real info, because the reason is that she's kind of like was in that state is Raimi's kind of wondering, like, maybe she actually escaped from Nightingale like that day back in 91 at the camp. Maybe that's what that was. Maybe that's why she's kind of in shock, because she does have information. So not unless the guy that's there is kind of covering up for Nightingale in some shape or form. I don't know. Because I am wondering, because I'm like, Nightingale at this point would be, I don't know, everyone else is kind of around and older. Like, even if you looked at the case of Julie, so that must have meant that Nightingale had to, because I'm curious, is Nightingale going to end up being someone that we've kind of met throughout the show without realizing it, or is it going to be someone that we've never known at all? It seems, I feel like what we're going to, like, I still, kind of going back to my Daniel thing, I still believe the person in 96 is different from the one in 2016. Because it's just the whole Amanda situation, like, him just randomly popping up there, like, I was like, I just happen to have business here. Did you ask me about fate? And it's like, maybe that's a cute way of saying fate. I'm like, no, I think it was fate that brought you together, because he's the guy that you're chasing down. Because I feel like that would impact Raimi the most. I think that'd be the biggest twist, because it's like, the man you're trying so hard to get back to is a serial killer. He's always been a serial killer, but the reason why he stopped was because he was with you. That's what I'm thinking. Because like I said, that's the biggest change to Raimi's life, is the fact that her and Daniel never met. And the killing stopped that's why Julie was never a victim, because so I'm like, because circumstances changed, or maybe Daniel never was a bad guy in the original timeline when Frank died, and maybe like certain things shifted when Frank lived and time changed, because like I said, we've seen kind of immediate changes here and there, but it's never like, I don't know, like, I don't know how to really phrase it, like long term changes, if you know what I mean. It's hard to phrase it. Like, we haven't seen things drastically change in everyone's lives. It's kind of what I'm pointing out. Like, the biggest drastic change so far to Raimi's real life. I mean, obviously there's stuff here and there with her personal life, but overall nothing drastically changed except for the whole, once again, it's a personal thing, but still the whole Daniel situation. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm not explaining it well. I do hope that you kind of have some slight idea of what I'm trying to say. That's what, like I said, that's what I get for like recording these, because like my brain gets a little jumbled and I get all over the place. The last thing I want to bring up is the whole, like, because I brought it up earlier, the Alicia Diaz's character, like, let her name slip my mind again, but apparently Stan kind of pulled like I don't know what the term is, bulletin or whatever, like basically for cops to be on the lookout for her. And like, you know, Frank is asking like, yo, Satch, why are you sticking up for Stan? He's a scumbag. You know what he is. And then Satch is like, yo, Frank, I got your back. I want you to understand that. Like, I'm looking out for you. And he's like, oh, thanks a lot. So that kind of makes me think maybe even back then, because I've always kept debating that since we found out the whole Satch and Stan thing. It's like, is Satch kind of in a situation where he's connected to Stan even back then? Like, I want to understand the circumstances as to why that's a thing. So, because that conversation makes me think like, hey, maybe it's not a 2016 thing. Maybe that is like a 96 thing as well. That even back then, it's a part in play. So it also begs the question, like I said, it hasn't been brought up, but the fact, because Raimi hasn't bothered asking about it, because I guess to her, it's not really, because right now she's focused on her mom, not really her dad. And I'm thinking, like I said, I'm getting a feeling that's going to pop up sooner or later. I brought it up earlier, but her dad dying in an accident, no way. It had to be on purpose. Whether it had to most likely be Stan. But the question is, maybe, just maybe, Satch was involved too. So maybe that's why he coddles Raimi so much, and he wants to be there for her, just because it's like, you know, Frank just got too nosy and ended up kind of back in Stan's crosshairs. I mean, as we see Stan try to kill him back in 96 by setting him up. So maybe during that car crash, he did something to do that. Maybe Frank was digging too deeply into Stan and some stuff that he might be hiding. So, I mean, that's really all I just kind of want to bring that up. So, but that's really all I want to talk about in this episode. So next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.